Yes, sir.
Do you think it gets done before the end of the year?
Oh, yeah. I think it's done like next week. If you just read the tea leaves today, Boehner sent staff to the White House, and they started talking again after a 1-week hiatus. And, again, DeMint left because I think he's throwing in the towel knowing what's coming. And so he's going to, some very conservative Republicans will start working from the outside to make their case. But, as I was talking with Rabbi Gelman earlier, what's interesting is immediately after we clear the cliff issue, and there are Republicans already putting the DREAM Act into legislative language. They're going to pass comprehensive immigration reform within 3 to 5 months after the start of the new year. That's going to get done. After that, there's not much left to do, really. They will do tax reform of some kind and entitlement reform of some kind as a companion to whatever they work out this in the next couple of weeks. As Art Cashin was saying on CNBC today, it's like we will know that this deal is done when the president gets on the plane for Hawaii, which right now is scheduled for December 17th. Okay, so it looks like, from all the tea leaves, and quite frankly, I've thought this even before the election, and it didn't really matter who the president was, that the deal would get done one way or another. If Mitt Romney had run the tables and gotten the House and the Senate, you would have seen the Ryan budget passed in a nanosecond. Now, what I would have preferred, to be quite honest, was would the Republicans take the Senate, and if President Obama wins, we would have more likely gotten a version of this program that would be closer to Simpson-Bowles, because the negotiations would have been much tougher and the president wouldn't have had as much leverage on tax hikes. In Simpson-Bowles, they lower the top tax rate to 24% and get rid of all deductions. They extend the eligibility ages for Social Security and Medicare by a year or so over the next 20 or 30 years and means test those two programs, thereby making each one solvent for another 75 and 85 years respectively. And pair defense spending. Defense budget has not been audited, by the way. Alan Simpson points this out routinely. Since 1996, there's been no audit of the defense budget in 16 years. We spend $760 billion a year on defense, which is more than the next 14 countries in the world, including Russia and China, combined. We are relatively safe. When you take Russia and China and put them together, and then add another 12, and we still spend more annually on defense, we're not really at risk. And some of the technological innovations that have taken place with respect to the type of surveillance and military capabilities that we have now leave us far in advance of even our most closest rivals. So there's room there as well. And I wish Simpson-Bowles would have been the legislation of choice, but it's not, and we'll deal with an imperfect solution, but it'll be better than no solution, and it will allow us to kind of move on to other topics. Yes, sir. No, you know what? I think the president's already made it quite clear that and again, the Republicans now, rather surprisingly, are negotiating from an extraordinary position of weakness. The polls that came out in the last 2 days, and again, this is not political preference, this is just analysis of the current environment. The polls that came out in the last 2 days show that 53% of the American people will blame the Republicans if we go over the fiscal cliff. And you saw within a day of that number coming out, Republicans capitulating on compromise on taxes. If they tie it to the debt ceiling, the president will hammer them again because they will be recreating the environment we saw in August of 2011. And so I think from a negotiating perspective, the president is holding most of the cards here. Now, it may not be a deal that we love, but it will keep the Republicans, I don't think, have the leverage to use the debt ceiling as a negotiating tool because they're going to get hammered as obstructionist and risking a recession. And the president's hand was strengthened when the Republicans lost 3 seats in the House and 2 in the Senate. And so he irrespective about how you feel about the outcome, this is what happened. And so again, I don't think they'll be able to pull that trick this year. So I think the debt ceiling, I don't know if he's going to get the permanent increase in the debt ceiling that he asked for that doesn't require congressional approval. I don't think they'll ever go for that. But I also don't think that they're going to hold the debt ceiling as a card in the negotiations and have any really public leverage. As soon as they try that, the president will go public. Look, he's been campaigning now for 2 weeks and painting the Republicans as obstructionists and being very successful at it. If they pulled that trick and made us look like we did last year, which actually, quite frankly, was embarrassing for our country globally, that we had such a ridiculous argument over raising the debt ceiling to pay for debts already incurred. So it has nothing to do with future spending. The debt ceiling is tied to past debts, not future debts. So it really has no bearing on fiscal probity or anything like that. This is really just to pay off what we already owe. So I think they don't have a chance of doing that, and it will be, it'd be a spectacle if they did. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I understand what you're saying, and I half agree with most of what you're saying.
You sound like my wife. In fact, it's a quarter more than she does.
But what I'd like to know is, in 2014,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to handle Obamacare? Nobody knows how we're going to pay.
I agree.
This is like crazy. So you're talking about today settling this? Okay, I agree with you. I like that. But in 2014, we're in deep doo-doo.
That's a technical term, as I understand it. So, look, I don't disagree, and quite frankly, when it comes to health care, I would never profess to understand anything.
And nobody does.
And that's the risk. No one understands it. Now we've, and it's hard to separate what is kind of fear-mongering among either employers or others who suggest that they're going to start laying off people in droves in order to sidestep the obligation to provide health care. We don't know if the states are going to go forward and set up the insurance exchanges as they're required to. Yes?
What we're going to do is have everybody work 20 hours a week.
It's a risk. I know, and I don't think we'll know till we get there. And now, the flip side of that is if the economy is growing robustly and consumer demand picks up relative to today, and I know for a lot of people that's a big if, I think the biggest disincentive to hiring thus far has not really been regulatory uncertainty. It's been the fact that the economy is not growing strongly enough for corporations to commit to permanent hires. And I think if you're growing at a rapid enough pace, some of these concerns will dissipate with growth. Growth solves a lot of problems, and if we can accelerate to a level that, is required, I don't think we'll have the same type of response that people are threatening right now. But again, that's an if.
And you know what? When I was in high school, my algebra teacher told me, if the sky falls down, it'll kill all the birds.
Correct. Well, I mean, this is a best guess. Okay, I mean, I can't do much better than that. So it's part of it. We've heard so many extreme predictions in the last several years that I find it sometimes difficult to go with every one of them and assume that they're going to be right. Look, I know it's a burden, but the question is whether or not, again, if the states don't set up exchanges, there's some people who are arguing that Obamacare by necessity will collapse, that it won't be, that you can't implement it. Now, if the Republicans had won the Senate, they would have defunded the entire thing, right? I mean, they would not have provided the adequate funding to go forward. So that's a risk. Quite frankly, I mean, if you're really afraid of Democratic policies, the bigger risk I see, given the stance that Republicans have taken on social issues, which cost them 2 seats in the Senate and 3 in the House, is they could very well lose the House in 2014. And you'll have Obama, Democratic Senate, Democratic House for the final 2 years of his administration, and Hillary as president in 2016. But for those of you who are having Democratic nightmares, that would be yours. There is, and the Rabbi and I were talking about this earlier, there is an issue in which there's an issue in the manner in which the Republican Party positioned itself for this election that may have longer lasting consequences than most people are willing to admit. Because of their stance on social issues having to do with women's reproductive rights, however you want to have that argument, because of their stance on immigration, which they're now about to capitulate on completely, they are scrambling to adopt a set of policies that will keep them from losing all 3 branches of government in 2014 and try to get the White House in 2016. Now, already people have begun to, and I hate when the news media does this, but they've already begun to handicap 2016 presidential race with Hillary as the front runner. Okay, so now we did this in 2008, and the one thing I'll say about 2008, had John Edwards' affair been exposed prior to Iowa, Hillary would have won Iowa, would have won New Hampshire, and Obama would have never been president. Right? That's, if you do the math on what Edwards took from the 2 of them, she probably easily would have won Iowa. So history could have been a lot different. Chris Christie's got a good shot at running. Despite the fact that many feel that he's a turncoat, he did one of the smartest political things I've ever seen in my life. However you want to characterize him, my state of New Jersey is going to get a boatload of FEMA money as a consequence of this particular maneuver. All right? He's not that stupid that he was going to let the state sink, literally, and not embrace the president during the midst of a natural disaster. And he was at the White House today, and he's collecting probably $30 billion off that one trade. As trades go, that wasn't a bad one to make. And he'll probably run for president at some point, and he's going to easily win a second term as governor in a blue state, having done this.